Are your employees stealing from you? Chances are they are. Stick around for my next episode of Why Employees Steal and the Psychology Behind the Theft. Next on Restaurant Talk with Gazwan. Hello, thank you for joining me today on Restaurant Talk. My name is Gazwan, your host. Today's topic is going to be about theft in the restaurant and bar industry. The problem is the restaurant and bar industry, the margins are so low. You're looking at 5 to 10% in profit margins, which is not a whole lot of money at the end of the day for all the work that gets involved in running a restaurant. It's the business owner's job to make sure that theft is minimized or eliminated by putting proper procedures in place to make sure that their staff are not skimming off the top to make sure that they're profitable and making money at the end of the day. Chances are it does happen. It happens more than you think. It's just a matter of how do we catch them? How do we catch them early? And how do we prevent them by putting certain procedures and policies in hand on if someone does steal, what are procedures, whether they get fired, whether they get calling the cops on them or getting you have to actually make sure that you do these kind of things in order to set a standard of what your restaurant is all about. So today we're going to be talking about not just the why restaurant employees steal, but actually let's start off with the psychology behind the theft. That's what today's topic is about. Let's get started. So one of the main reasons is probably the most obvious to you guys right now is probably that they're not making enough money. And if they're not making enough money, they're going to steal. So chances are either they're underpaid or they're not making enough money in tips, depending on the environment that you're in. So if someone's making more money than them, they're going to kind of feel that they should be making more money. And if they don't, then chances are they're going to try to skim here and there in certain ways, which we'll go over in another episode. So the other way is if they're making tips, and if the environment that you're setting for is that, let's say you have 5 servers on a Tuesday night, and each server only walks away with $20. Nobody wants to be there making $20 working 6, 7, 8-hour shifts and not making enough money. I understand it's your job as a manager or an owner in order to make sure that you're fully staffed for the restaurant if you get busy. And sometimes we overstaff, and I get it, but we need to make sure that we're staffing accordingly to business needs as well as to make sure that our employees are going to make money and be happy and they want to stay. If they're going to walk out with $20, on a given night, they're not going to want to stay. They're going to find somewhere else where they're going to make more money and they'll be able to pay their bills. So you have to find that fine line of where, do you put on 3 servers, 4 servers, or 5 servers? You need to know the amount of covers that you do historically. You can check your point of sale system to see how many covers you've done on a Tuesday night historically. And you divide that by how many covers an employee can take. Depends on their skill set. So if you're doing 100 covers on a Tuesday night, you might want to go with 3 to 4 servers. If you put that 5th one on, they may not make enough money. So chances are that you want to bring it down to 3 to 4 servers, maybe a stronger service, so they can maybe do 3 servers, so they can maybe walk away with $100, $150, hopefully on a slower night by having a little bit less employees. So start off with that. And then you can kind of figure out, do I need more? Do I need less? But making sure that your employees are happy making money. Otherwise, things of this nature will happen in many different ways. It's not just kind of taking it off the top. There's other ways that employees will steal, which we'll talk about in other episodes, but making sure that they're paid hourly correctly and they are making their tips sufficient enough to survive. The other one is, which is also kind of important, is if they're overworked. If they feel that they're overworked, they're working too many hours, they're working 5, 6, 7 days, double shifts. If they feel like they're overworked, they're not going to be comfortable. They're not going to be fresh. They're not going to want to come to work every day if they're overtired. So if they're overworked, I understand this is the restaurant industry. We say it all the time. You're here today, you're gone today. Servers come and go, managers come and go, bartenders come and go. So chances are, if we lose somebody to a shift, then you have to make up that shift, or you may put less employees on and just tell the customers, look, we're short-staffed today. But to overwork someone and give them, 7, 8 tables, they're not going to give great service, and they're not going to make enough money because they're not going to give great service. So you might want to trim that down to be able to make sure that the employees can take those amount of tables, so they're not overworked, and spread out those shifts to someone else, or try to find staff as fast as possible. Making sure also they're not working too much overtime. And also sometimes I've seen in the restaurant industry that they're working overtime, that the owners actually pay them at the regular rate, which is not only illegal but also unfair. So to pay someone on a regular rate for overtime that they work, they're not going to be happy. So make sure that you guys are paying them fairly. If they're paying fair, they're going to want to come to work. They want to make sure that they take care of you. But if you're not paying them correctly for their overtime, or if you're not paying them for their overtime, chances are they're not going to be happy. And I've also seen a lot of times where business owners pay employees by the shift. So if you're working a shift pay, it may work to your advantage, it may work to your disadvantage. It depends on what your hourly shift pay is, which I also think might be illegal. I can't speak on that on the different states. But if you're getting a shift pay, and that is your policy at your restaurant, if you feel that you're working 8, 9, 10 hours and your shift pay comes less than what your normally hourly pay should be, chances are you're going to have some unhappy employees, and then skimming is going to come through that. So be careful with that and making sure that you pay them correctly, their hourly rate, and making sure that they're making enough tips. Okay. The next thing that is important also, if you want to watch out for, is if you hear your employees say something like, well, I just got into a car accident, or I just got a ticket, or I just lost my apartment, or any of those kind of issues that you hear from your employees to say that they're in debt or they have some financial issues. Chances are, not to say that it's going to happen, but something to keep an eye on, just in case, is to keep an eye on that. If you see someone that says, okay, I lost my car, or I lost my license, or something happened to that nature, just watch out. You might, find something that an employee will say, oh, someone walked out on my check, or I lost this check, or, somebody didn't pay me, in order to keep that money, just to make some extra cash here and there. So when you hear those kind of things, just be aware. I'm not saying that it happens or it could happen to that individual. You could have some of the nicest people in the world that don't have these issues that are some of the biggest thieves, but it's just something to watch out for. If you hear somebody say that, just keep an eye on it. And, ask them if they need any help, if they need any more shifts, if they can pick up more shifts, make more money, that's great. You can help them out by doing that. If they unfortunately can't pick up any shifts and it happens to be their second job already, then just keep an eye on it. It's just something that you have to be aware of. If somebody mentions these kind of things, it may come out directly or it may come out indirectly through some other people talking about it. So just pay attention to that. Okay. The other thing that we find out is if there's unvalued employees in our restaurant, if they feel that you really don't pay attention to them. You really don't care. They're just a number. They come in, they pull a shift, and then they leave. If you really don't kind of respect your employees, and if you really don't kind of pay attention to them and kind of, give them some support, if they feel that they're undervalued or undercredited and they, feel like they're not getting that kind of moral support from you, chances are they're not going to care. If you don't care, they're not going to care. Why should they care if you really don't care about their needs? If someone tells you that, hey, I need a day off, or, I have a wedding to go to or somewhere to be, you have to help them out and try to get that day off, or try to get them, coverage. So they feel that, I'm being taken care of. So next time, if he needs something, I'm definitely going to help him out as well. So I think we see that a lot also in some theft, if they feel that they're under valued as an employee. Things of these nature tend to happen. So that's kind of the psychology about some of the things that why these employees do these things. So the other thing is also if they feel that somebody's making more money than them. And I talked about that a little bit, and I see that a lot more, probably in the kitchen, since that's more of an hourly paid position. Is we see that if one cook is making more than the other cook, and this guy has more skill than this guy could have been here for 5 years. This guy just started, and he's making a little bit more money than them. I think that's where some of the inconsistencies, where the people are going to be unhappy and may start kind of taking things into their own hands. So just kind of be careful with that. Just try to keep the rate somewhat consistency based on the skill set of that position. I'm not saying that you got to pay someone exactly the same if they have more skill set. There's always a range where people start as a cook, and maybe let's say $18 to $23 an hour, or whatever the case may be. And it depends on your skill set. It may go up, or it might be, if you're on a beginning skill set, you might start off at the 18 and may move them up. The other thing we also notice is that be careful of false promises. If someone feels like, you tell them, okay, we're going to start you off at $18 an hour as a cook today, and maybe in 6 months we'll evaluate you and see if you, are great in your position, that we might, bump you up to $1 or $2 or something like that. If that 6 months comes and you're not paying attention to that, if you haven't reviewed them in the 6 months that they've been there, and you didn't give them the raise, not to say that you promised them, but you promised them a review, And like I said, you don't have to give them a raise. If you reviewed them and you find out that they've called out or they're not consistent and they don't care about their job, doesn't mean they have to get a raise just because they did a good job. If they did a good job, sorry, if they did a good job, then yeah, they should get a raise. But if they feel that they're just kind of consistent and they're not, doing more to build up and want to make that extra money and prove to you that they're a better skill set, the chances are then they're not going to get it. If you see someone who's once in the hump and they're doing very well and always on time, never calls out, and is a team player and wants to help you out, then yeah, after 6 months, if you feel that you can bump them up for that $1, $2, $3, whatever it is, I think they deserve it, and that's the people that you want to keep around. Okay. The other area that we find that's where people steal is you make it too easy for them. Honestly, guys, and I see this a lot. I see this a lot in the restaurant industry and the bar industries that employees kind of have a full range. I see bartenders having keys to the liquor room, bartenders having keys to the office, prep cooks or your first person in the building, they have keys to come in and start prepping, and they're 2 hours there before you. They could do a lot in those 2 hours. And I had an instance when I was a manager back in the days where there was a prep cook that we had that has been there for 20 plus years, and had the keys to the restaurant, comes in at 6 o'clock in the morning. First cook and manager didn't get in until 8, 9 o'clock. And we find some stuff that we're spending more money on kitchenware and, and months to come into that. And we're finding out as managers, why are we spending so much money on, buying these extra things? And we felt like there's something wrong about this. So we had we had the GM actually sit in a corner in a parking lot somewhere hidden and watch this prep cook back his truck right into the loading dock, and started putting pots and pans and silverware and things like that into his trunk, and he got arrested for that. So again, we do that. We trust our employees to do the right thing, but we have to keep an eye on them and make sure that they are doing the right thing by checking in. So just because he has the keys doesn't mean you have to trust him. You have to make sure that you come in, maybe pop in one day at 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock and check in to see what they're doing. Maybe they are doing the right thing. Maybe they're not. Maybe you just don't give them the keys. Maybe you have someone else as a manager or chef open the doors for them. But I see that a lot where we kind of even I've seen it many, many times where bartenders have the keys and close up. Manager leaves at 10, 11 o'clock. Bartender closes and locks up. You're basically giving the keys to right to the employees in order to close shop, which I don't believe in that. And chances are, giving that ability, chances are it could happen. So be aware of that. And then also, I said a lot of times that absent, ownership is probably your biggest fear. If you're not around, if you're not showing them that you're aware or you're in the building, if you're out for a couple of days, you don't show up and someone else is closing. Even if it's a manager, you have to show face and you have to be in your restaurants, as much as possible. And I know, look, I've been in the restaurant business for years, just even as a manager, I'm pulling 60, 70, 80-hour weeks. And I'm sure ownerships, put more hours in that. And I know it's tough and hard. And you also have a life and you have a family. But you also have to understand that it's part of the business and people are going to try to do that. But you need to make sure that you try to minimize that as much as possible, that there is no theft in your restaurant because it's costing you. And there's times that if we're saying that the profit margins are between 5 and 10%. If you have a bad week or bad month or something happens, you could be in the negative very, very fast. So be careful with that. Just pay attention. The other thing is that I feel that if you're an absentee manager and owner, they see that and they're going to test you on that. So also test you on the managers. If they find that as a manager that if John's working today, for example, and I can get away with everything with him, or he gives me the keys all the time and I'm pretty much running the show for him, they're going to know that, as opposed to, let's say, Bob, who's closing, is this guy's, by the book. I want to make sure that I work with John, not Bob, because, I want to be able to do what I want to do in order to, make some extra cash. So be aware of that. You also want managers, periodically, every 6 months or a year, change up their shifts. Okay. If they're opening, 5 days a week, have them open 3 days a week, close 2 days a week, or rotate them. If they always open, have them always close, after, 6 months or a year. So nobody's necessarily, as a manager, is just obligated to just open or just close. I hope you don't hire someone just for that, unless maybe you're hiring somebody as a supervisor to open But managers really don't have necessarily a say of saying, well, I am just opening or I'm just closing. I'm that type of manager. That doesn't usually work unless you always open. But you should always rotate. Just because you're the owner doesn't mean you should be there from 8 o'clock to 8 o'clock at night or whatever. You should change shifts so you can see what happens on different shifts. I always recommend that, or work on days that you don't usually work. If you're not there on a Sunday, work a Sunday. Or if you're not there on a Saturday, work a Saturday. On days where they don't expect you, that's when people tend to kind of do mischiefs when they know that you're not there. We don't expect you to work, 7 days a week. I get it. I'm not saying that. But the next best thing is, to make sure that you're hiring the right managers and you're checking up on them, making sure that they're doing the right thing. And in order to do that, you have to trust the people and you have to test them. Okay, I always said that, you get more out of what you inspect rather than what you expect. We'll talk about that at a later date. But you have to check up on your employees. You don't assume that everybody's doing the right thing. You have to make sure that you check up on them and make sure that they're doing the right thing. And if they're not, what are the consequences? Okay. Another reason why people steal is simply greed. They just feel that they can steal. The opportunity's there, and they're greedy, and they just want it. And if it's there, they say, "Yo, I don't care. I'm just gonna take it." And sometimes theft is not necessarily always big. And I don't want to always talk about theft as whether it's money or products or stuff like that. It can be almost anything. Even if it's something small, you may not think if it's something stealing, whether it's you know shakers or a knife or something small like that. It adds up. If one person does it, another person does it, and they talk about it, and you feel like that everybody kind of is doing it, then it adds up, because the stuff is not cheap. And then you have to make sure that people are not having that kind of attitude that it's okay to do that. So the other thing that people will say is that it's no big deal. This guy has a lot of money. He doesn't care. It's not gonna affect him. These guys are millionaires. What's a knife or a pan or a pot or some liquor, a bottle of liquor here and there, or if I take a steak home, it's not a big deal. Then I got to pay attention, or they're not monitoring us, or they don't do food costs or liquor cost inventories and stuff like that. They'll never know. So, that kind of mentality you find out as well is that, oh, it's not a big deal, or these guys are loaded, they're not going to miss it. You get that mentality where people feel like, it is not a big deal, I'm going to do it anyway. So those are the things you're going to have to watch out for. Don't boast about how your lifestyle is, or, posting all the stuff is where all your vacations and driving nice cars and stuff like that. If they feel that you're boasting about your lifestyle, it's because it's on their backs. They're your employees who actually put you into that position. They're the ones who made the money for you, being a server or bartender or cook. They put you in that position to make that kind of money. So don't necessarily throw that in the face or boast about it, because they're going to feel like, well, I'm going to be able to steal. It's not a big deal. He already has enough money. He's not going to be affected by me stealing this one piece of, steak or one bottle of liquor or, whatever the case may be. So just kind of be careful of how you act around your employees and what you talk about and what you post, or kind of cars you guys are driving. I think people kind of see that as a, why not? Okay. It's not going to affect him. Okay? So that's all I have for this episode for the theft in the restaurant and the psychology behind it. Think about it and watch this episode, if you have to, once or twice, if not more, just to kind of pay attention to why employees are stealing. And I have a few more episodes following this to kind of give you the reasons they have been stealing and what are the ways they're stealing and how to avoid it, so to make sure that you guys are not falling behind and losing money in this business, because it is a very tight profit business, and we want to make sure that you guys are successful and the employees are not stealing from you. That's all I have for today's episode. Thank you for watching Restaurant Talk with Gazwan. Hope you had a good time. Pay attention to your employees and make sure they're not stealing from you. Have a great day.